Millionaire CEO froze at the gala when his ex-fiancée walks in with twins who look just like him. Grace. Her name emerged as barely more than a whisper. Damien. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the emotion that flickered in her eyes. I didn't expect to see you here. Who are they? The question was direct, his gaze moving to the children who now regarded him with open curiosity. Grace's posture shifted subtly, protective. This isn't the place for this conversation. Then where is? Damien countered, his voice low but intense. When is? 5 years ago, perhaps. You look like the man in Mommy's silver frame, the little girl observed with disarming directness. Damien felt the impact of those words like a physical blow. She had kept photos of him. The children knew his face, even if they didn't know who he was. We should talk, Grace conceded quietly. But not here. Not now. Tomorrow, Damien stated rather than asked. My office. 10 o'clock. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to discover you've been a father for years without knowing it? To see your own eyes staring back at you from the faces of children you never knew existed? If you've ever experienced a moment that completely shattered your reality, give this video a like. I'm Mr. Harrison, and today's story will take you on an emotional journey about control, secrets, and the unexpected paths to love and redemption. The annual Evergreen Foundation Charity Gala represented everything Damien Richard had built his life around: power, prestige, and the carefully curated image of success. At 42, he had transformed Meridian Innovations from a struggling tech startup into a billion-dollar empire through relentless determination and an unwavering commitment to controlling every variable in his life. Tonight was no different. His custom Armani tuxedo fit perfectly against his athletic frame, his dark hair styled with just enough silver at the temples to suggest distinguished experience rather than age. The champagne in his hand, untouched for the past hour, was merely a prop in the performance of being Damien Richard, tech visionary and philanthropist. The quarterly projections look promising, remarked Victor Blackwell, Meridian's CFO and one of the few people Damien considered something close to a friend. The board is particularly impressed with the neural interface division. They should be, Damien replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that had become his trademark. We're 3 years ahead of our closest competitor. Victor nodded, taking a sip of his champagne. Speaking of competitors, Ellison from Nexus Tech is here tonight. 10 o'clock, by the bar. Damien didn't bother looking. This was how he operated, always 3 steps ahead, always calculating the most advantageous move. I'll speak with him later, after his funding announcement falls flat next week. Victor chuckled. Always the strategist. Until the universe decided to introduce a variable he couldn't control. The subtle shift in the room's energy registered before he consciously processed what was happening. Conversations faltered. Heads turned toward the grand entrance, and a ripple of whispers spread across the gathering. Damien turned, following the collective gaze of the crowd. And there she was. Grace Turner stood in the doorway, a vision in wine silk that caught the light with every breath. 5 years had passed since he'd seen her last, yet time seemed to have only refined her beauty. Her chestnut hair now fell in soft waves to her shoulders rather than the long curls he remembered. Her posture carried a new confidence, her smile more assured. But it wasn't Grace alone that caused Damien's carefully constructed world to tilt on its axis. Flanking her on either side, holding her hands with matching expressions of wide-eyed wonder, were 2 children, a boy and a girl, perhaps 4 years old, with familiar amber eyes and the same determined set to their small chins that Damien saw every morning in his mirror. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor in a crystalline explosion that seemed to happen in slow motion. The sound cut through the murmurs, drawing every eye in the room, including Grace's. Their gazes locked across the crowded ballroom, and in that moment, Damien Richard, the man who had built an empire on his ability to anticipate and control every outcome, found himself completely, utterly frozen. Damien? Victor's voice seemed to come from miles away. Are you all right? But Damien couldn't respond. His mind was racing through calculations, possibilities, implications, and landing repeatedly on one inescapable conclusion. Those children, with their amber eyes, with the boy's serious expression and the girl's curious tilt of the head, they were his. They had to be his. And Grace had kept them from him for nearly 5 years. The realization hit him with physical force, a tightness in his chest that made breathing suddenly difficult. 5 years of their lives gone. First steps, first words, first everything. Moments he hadn't even known to miss. Grace was moving now, guiding the children through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting greetings with gracious smiles while keeping the twins close. She was deliberately avoiding his section of the ballroom, Damien realized, her path taking her toward the opposite side where the foundation's director stood welcoming guests. "Excuse me," he managed to say to Victor, already moving before the words were fully formed. The crowd seemed to part before him, conversations hushing as he passed. Damien Richard's intensity was legendary in Boston's business circles. The focused determination that had built Meridian was now directed entirely at reaching Grace and those children. His children. He intercepted them near the grand staircase, positioning himself directly in their path with a suddenness that caused Grace to stop abruptly, her smile faltering. After their brief, tense exchange, Grace guided the twins away, disappearing into the crowd with practiced social grace. Damien remained rooted to the spot, his mind racing with questions and a growing sense of something he rarely experienced: loss of control. Victor appeared at his side, concern evident in his expression. "What was that about? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Damien replied, his gaze still fixed on the last place he'd seen Grace and the twins. "My children." The revelation hung in the air between them, Victor's shock palpable in the silence that followed. "You're certain?" he finally asked. "Look at them, Victor." Damien turned to his friend, his expression a complex mixture of anger, wonder, and determination. "They're 4, maybe 5 years old. They have my eyes, my expressions." The timing aligns perfectly with when Grace left. Left was a sanitized version of what had actually happened. 5 years ago, Grace Turner had walked away from their engagement after a devastating argument about priorities and futures, returning his ring with a finality that had both enraged and shattered him. 2 weeks later, she had disappeared from Boston entirely, leaving her position at the city's most prestigious architectural firm and vanishing so completely that even Damien's considerable resources had failed to locate her. Now he understood why. If you've ever had someone keep a life-changing secret from you, hit that like button right now. The pain of betrayal cuts deep, especially when it involves family. "What are you going to do?" Victor asked quietly. Damien's expression hardened into the familiar mask of determination that had built Meridian Innovations from nothing. "Whatever it takes. Those are my children, Victor. Mine. And I've already lost 5 years with them." "Tread carefully," Victor advised, recognizing the dangerous glint in his friend's eye. "This isn't a hostile takeover. These are children." And Grace clearly had her reasons. "Reasons I intend to understand fully," Damien replied, his tone leaving no doubt about his resolve. "And then I intend to become part of their lives, whether Grace approves or not." The remainder of the gala passed in a blur. Damien went through the motions, shaking hands, making small talk, even delivering his planned remarks about Meridian's commitment to the foundation's work. But his mind remained fixed on Grace and the twins, who stayed carefully on the opposite side of the ballroom. Later that night, alone in his penthouse overlooking the Boston skyline, Damien poured himself a rare glass of scotch and allowed his mind to travel back to the beginning, to the day he'd first met Grace Turner, 6 years earlier. She had been presenting architectural designs for Meridian's new headquarters, a junior architect sent when her boss fell ill. Most people would have been intimidated presenting to Damien Richard and his executive team, but Grace had been different. When he'd questioned one of her design choices, suggesting it prioritized aesthetics over functionality, she hadn't backed down. "With all due respect, Mr. Richard," she had said, her green eyes meeting his directly, "if I wanted to design something merely functional, I'd be creating warehouses, not the headquarters for a company that claims to be revolutionizing the future." This design marries form and function in a way that will make people feel something when they enter. Isn't that what Meridian is about? Creating technology that doesn't just work, but transforms how people experience the world. The room had fallen silent, his executives waiting for the legendary Damien Richard temper to erupt. Instead, he had smiled, a genuine smile that rarely appeared in business settings. "You're absolutely right, Ms. Turner," he had conceded. "And you're hired." "Excuse me?" Grace had looked confused. "Not for your firm. For Meridian. I want you as our in-house architect, overseeing not just the headquarters but all our global offices. Your vision aligns perfectly with ours." "I already have a job, Mr. Richard. I'll double your salary." "It's not about the money." "Triple it, then. Plus creative control." She had laughed then, a sound that somehow cut through his usual defenses. "Do you always get what you want?" "Always," he had replied, not yet understanding that Grace Turner would be the exception to that rule in more ways than one. She had taken the job, but not immediately. She had made him wait 2 weeks for her answer, something no one did to Damien Richard. That had been his first clue that Grace was different. She wouldn't be rushed, controlled, or intimidated. And something in him had responded to that strength, that certainty of self. Their professional relationship had quickly evolved into friendship, and then into something deeper. Damien found himself sharing thoughts with Grace he'd never voiced to anyone. About his childhood in foster care, about building Meridian from nothing, about his fears that success had cost him something essential along the way. "You've built walls so high," she told him once, as they sat on the balcony of his penthouse. The city lights spread before them like stars. "You're so focused on controlling everything that you miss the beauty of uncertainty." "Uncertainty is just another word for risk," he had replied. Grace had smiled, touching his face gently. "Risk is also another word for possibility, for growth, for life." Damien swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the memory so vivid he could almost feel her touch again. How had they gone from that moment of perfect understanding to where they were now? Strangers with shared children he hadn't even known existed. The answer lay in what had happened next, in the months that followed as their relationship deepened and the fundamental differences in how they viewed the world began to create fractures neither of them saw coming. Her relationship had progressed with the same intensity that characterized everything in Damien's life. Within 6 months, they were living together. By their 1-year anniversary, he had proposed with a ring specially designed to reflect the architectural principles Grace so valued. Beauty with purpose, form with function. The memory of her face when he'd presented it still haunted him. Joy, yes, but also a flicker of something else. Hesitation, concern. He'd dismissed it then, attributing it to surprise. Now, staring out at the city lights, he wondered if she had already sensed the storm coming. The proposal had coincided with Meridian's most ambitious expansion yet, a global initiative that demanded every moment of Damien's attention. Gradually, dinner dates were canceled, weekend getaways postponed, conversations cut short by urgent calls. Grace had been patient, understanding the demands of building something revolutionary. But patience had its limits. "We need to talk about the wedding," she had said one rare evening when they were both home before midnight. "It's been 8 months since you proposed, and we haven't set a date." "The Singapore deal is closing next month," he had replied, not looking up from his laptop. "After that, we'll have time to focus on wedding plans." "That's what you said about the Dubai project. And before that, the London office." Her voice had held no accusation, just a quiet sadness that should have been his warning. "I'm beginning to think there will always be another deal, another project, another reason to postpone our life together." That had gotten his attention. He'd closed the laptop, turning to her fully. "This is our life together. Everything I'm building for us, for our future. But what about the present, Damien? When do we actually live the life you're working so hard to secure?" The conversation had ended with reassurances and promises, a date tentatively set for the following spring. But the underlying tension remained, surfacing again when the topic of children arose. "I want a family," Grace had told him one Sunday morning as they lingered over coffee, Another rare moment of calm in their hectic lives. Not someday in the distant future when everything is perfect. Soon. We will, he had assured her. Once the company is stable, once the right structures are in place. Having children is a major responsibility, Grace. I want to be certain we can give them everything they deserve. Including time? She had asked pointedly. Because that's what children need most. Not perfect circumstances or material advantages. Just parents who are present. The argument that followed had been their first serious one. A clash of fundamentally different perspectives on what made a life well lived. Grace valued presence, connection, the messy beauty of imperfect moments shared. Damien valued security, achievement, the creation of perfect conditions for happiness to flourish. Neither was wrong, but the gap between their visions had begun to widen. The final breaking point had come on a rainy Tuesday evening. Damien had canceled their anniversary dinner, the third year in a row, for an emergency board meeting. When he'd finally arrived home near midnight, expecting to find Grace asleep, he'd instead found her sitting in the dark living room, her packed suitcase beside her. "I can't do this anymore," she had said simply, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I love you, Damien, but I can't build a life with someone who always puts that life last on their priority list. That's not fair," he had argued, exhaustion and stress making his tone sharper than intended. "Everything I do for us." "No." Grace had stood then, her posture straight, dignified even in her pain. "You do it for your vision of what our life should be. But you never asked if it's the life I want." "What do you want, then?" he had demanded, frustration building. "Tell me, and I'll make it happen." "That's exactly the problem. You think you can solve everything, control everything, arrange everything to your specifications. But life, real life, doesn't work that way." She had slipped the engagement ring from her finger, placing it on the coffee table between them. "I want a partner who understands that the most precious things in life can't be scheduled, controlled, or perfected. They can only be experienced, moment by imperfect moment." "You're being emotional," he had said dismissively, a response he had regretted instantly and every day since. "Let's discuss this tomorrow when we're both thinking clearly." "I've never been thinking more clearly," Grace had replied, picking up her suitcase. "Goodbye, Damien." He had let her go, convinced she would return once her anger cooled. When days passed with no word, he had sent flowers, then gifts, then finally a handwritten letter acknowledging his mistakes and promising change. But Grace had vanished, leaving no forwarding address, changing her phone number, disappearing so completely it was as if she had never existed. Pride had eventually overcome his attempts to find her. If she wanted to disappear, let her. He had a company to run, an empire to build. Life continued, or so he had told himself. Now, staring into his scotch, the truth he had avoided for 5 years stared back at him. He had lost the only woman he had ever truly loved because he couldn't relinquish control, couldn't accept that some things, the most important things, couldn't be managed like a business acquisition. And in losing her, he had lost his children too. Children he hadn't even known existed. The thought sent a fresh wave of anger through him. Whatever her reasons for leaving, what right had she to keep his own flesh and blood from him? To deny him the knowledge of their existence? To deny them a father? If you've ever had to choose between success and happiness, between control and connection, comment below. Sometimes the hardest choices are between two things we desperately want. Morning found Damien in his office 2 hours earlier than usual, reviewing every scrap of information his team had managed to gather overnight about Grace's life since leaving Boston. The picture that emerged both surprised and unsettled him. She had relocated to Portland, Oregon, about as far from Boston as one could get while remaining in the continental United States. There, she had established a small but respected architectural firm specializing in sustainable community spaces. Grace Turner Designs had won several awards for innovative approaches to affordable housing and public buildings that served marginalized communities. More personally, she appeared to be raising the twins, Michael and Mary, according to school registration records, entirely on her own. No partner, no co-parent. Just Grace and 2 children who, based on their birth certificates, had been born 7 months after she left Boston. 7 months. The timing sent another jolt of anger through him. She had been pregnant when she walked out. She had known she was carrying his children and had chosen to disappear without a word. "Sir," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Miss Turner has arrived." Damien took a deep breath, straightening his tie and schooling his features into the impassive mask that had served him well through countless high-stakes negotiations. This would be the most important meeting of his life, and he would not allow emotion to dictate its outcome. "Send her in." The door opened, and Grace entered. In daylight, without the glamour of evening wear, she looked both more familiar and more of a stranger. Her simple gray dress and minimal jewelry spoke of a different life than the one she might have had with him, yet she carried herself with the same quiet confidence that had first drawn him to her. "Damien," she nodded, declining to take the seat he indicated. "I'd prefer to stand." "As you wish." He remained seated behind his desk, a deliberate power move. "I appreciate you coming. Did I have a choice? You made it clear at the gala that this conversation was happening, with or without my cooperation." "There's always a choice, Grace." His voice was cool, controlled. "You've certainly exercised yours freely in the past." She flinched slightly at that, but held her ground. "If you've brought me here to berate me, I'll save us both time and leave now. I've brought you here for answers." Damien stood now, unable to maintain the pretense of casual control. "Those children, Michael and Mary, they're mine, aren't they?" Grace met his gaze directly. "Yes." The single word, spoken without hesitation or qualification, landed like a physical blow. Despite his certainty, hearing the confirmation aloud made it suddenly irrevocably real. "You were pregnant when you left." It wasn't a question. "Yes. And you didn't think I deserved to know?" The anger he had been suppressing rose to the surface. "You didn't think they deserved a father?" "I thought they deserved a father who would be present in their lives," Grace replied, her own anger flaring. "Not one who would pencil them in between board meetings and business trips. That wasn't your decision to make, wasn't it?" Grace's voice rose to match his. "You made your priorities abundantly clear, Damien. Work first, always. Everything and everyone else a distant second. That's not fair, and you know it. Isn't it? You missed our anniversary dinner 3 years in a row. You postponed setting a wedding date for almost a year. You couldn't even commit to starting a family until the time was right. Which, knowing you, would have been never." Damien moved from behind the desk, closing the distance between them. "So instead, you decided to punish me by taking my children away? By denying me even the knowledge of their existence?" "I wasn't punishing you," Grace said, her voice softening slightly. "I was protecting them. And yes, protecting myself too." "From what? From me? What kind of monster do you think I am?" "Not a monster, Damien. Just a man who believes he can control everything and everyone around him. A man who would have tried to dictate every aspect of my pregnancy, their upbringing, our co-parenting arrangement. A man who would have used his considerable resources to ensure things happened exactly as he wanted, regardless of what anyone else needed." The accusation struck uncomfortably close to home, especially in light of the strategies he had been formulating since last night. Legal actions, custody arrangements, financial provisions, all designed to secure his place in the twins' lives on his terms. "They're my children too," he said finally, his voice quieter but no less intense. "I had a right to know them, to be part of their lives." "Yes," Grace admitted, surprising him. "You did. And perhaps I was wrong to keep them from you entirely. But I wasn't wrong about why I left, Damien. And I wasn't wrong to create a life for them where they are priorities, not afterthoughts." Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words and complicated emotions. Damien turned away, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city he had helped shape. His reflection stared back at him, successful, powerful, alone. "What are they like?" he asked finally, his voice softer than before. The question seemed to catch Grace off guard. She had clearly come prepared for anger, for legal threats, for the full force of Damien Richards' legendary determination. This simple, human inquiry momentarily disarmed her. There. She paused, searching for words. They're extraordinary. Michael is thoughtful, observant. He watches everything, processes it internally before speaking. He builds these incredible structures with his blocks, architectural, like they have purpose beyond just being tall. A small smile touched Damien's lips despite himself. And Mary, pure energy, curious about everything, questions constantly. She's fearless. Climbs the highest playground equipment, jumps into the deep end of the pool, introduces herself to strangers before I can stop her. Grace's expression softened as she spoke of her daughter. She has your determination. Once she decides to do something, there's no changing her mind. They sound perfect, Damien said quietly. They're not perfect. They're real children with tantrums and fears and bad days. But they're. Grace hesitated, then finished simply, they're ours. Ours. The word hung in the air between them, a reminder of what could have been, what should have been. I want to know them, Damien said, turning back to face her. Not as occasional visitors in my life, but as my children. I've missed 5 years, Grace. I won't miss any more. And how exactly do you envision that working? Grace asked, wariness returning to her voice. Your life is here in Boston. Ours is in Portland. Your schedule barely allowed time for a relationship, let alone parenting. Things change. People change. Do they? Have you? The skepticism in her tone was unmistakable. Before Damien could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Emergency board call in 5 minutes. Potential hostile takeover attempt by Nexus Tech. 5 years ago, he would have dismissed Grace immediately, prioritizing the crisis without a second thought. Now, looking at the message and then at the mother of his children, he made a different choice. Tell them to reschedule, he said into the intercom. I'm in the middle of something important. Grace's eyes widened slightly at this unexpected response. You asked if I've changed, Damien continued, setting his phone aside. The truth is, I don't know. I've spent 5 years building Meridian higher and stronger, telling myself it was what mattered most. Then I saw 2 children with my eyes looking back at me, and suddenly nothing else seemed important at all. One gesture doesn't erase 5 years of priorities, Damien. No, it doesn't. But it's a start. He moved closer, his voice earnest now. I'm not asking you to uproot your lives immediately. I'm asking for a chance to know my children, and for them to know me. To find a way forward that works for all of us. Grace studied him, searching for the manipulation, the control that had characterized their relationship's end. Instead, she found something unfamiliar in Damien Richards' expression. Uncertainty, vulnerability, hope. It won't be simple, she said finally. They don't know you're their father. They know about you, that you exist, that you and I were together once, but not the full truth. When were you planning to tell them? When they were old enough to understand. When I could explain why I made the choices I did without it sounding like their father didn't want them. The implication stung, but Damien recognized the truth in it. Had he known about Grace's pregnancy, would he have risen to the occasion? Or would he have tried to manage it like another business challenge, scheduling fatherhood around his more pressing priorities? We can tell them together, he suggested, when the time is right. For now, I could just be a friend, someone getting to know them gradually. Grace considered this, her practical nature weighing the proposal. They're returning to Portland tomorrow. We only came for the foundation event. I designed their new community center. I know, Damien said, surprising her again. Your work has been exceptional. The Sustainable Housing Initiative in East Portland particularly. You've been following my career? I never stopped, he admitted quietly. If you've ever regretted letting someone walk away from your life, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes we don't realize what we had until it's gone. The moments stretched between them, charged with unspoken history and complicated emotions. I have meetings in Portland next month, Damien said finally, though no such meetings existed yet. Perhaps I could see them then. Just briefly as your friend. Grace hesitated, then nodded slowly. I think that would be acceptable. But Damien, her voice took on a warning tone. If this is some strategy to gain their trust before launching a legal battle for custody, tell me now, because I will fight you with everything I have. It's not, he assured her, though the thought had indeed crossed his mind during his sleepless night. I just want to know them, to be part of their lives in whatever way I can. All right then, one visit. We'll see how it goes. As Grace prepared to leave, Damien found himself reluctant to end their conversation, to let her walk away again. The photo in the silver frame, he said suddenly. The one Mary mentioned. Which one is it? Grace paused at the door, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. From the charity sailing regatta. You were laughing with the wind in your hair. It's the only time I ever saw you completely unguarded, completely in the moment. Damien remembered that day, one of the rare occasions when he had set work aside entirely, when he had allowed himself to simply experience joy without analyzing or controlling it. It had been Grace's influence that made such moments possible. I'd like to be that man again, he said softly. The one in the photo. I hope you find him, Grace replied, equally soft, for the twins' sake, and your own. With that, she was gone, leaving Damien alone with possibilities he had never dared to imagine. The month that followed was unlike any in Damien Richards' carefully ordered life. For the first time in his career, he delegated critical decisions to his executive team. He rearranged his schedule to create space for what truly mattered. He even began sessions with a therapist, something he had always dismissed as unnecessary, to understand the patterns that had cost him so much. You equate control with safety, Dr. Winters observed during their third session. Not unusual for someone with your background. Foster care rarely provides stability or security. I built Meridian from nothing because I never wanted to feel powerless again, Damien acknowledged. But in controlling everything around me, I lost the one person who mattered most. And now I have a second chance. Not just with Grace, but with children I never knew I wanted until I saw them. The day of his Portland trip arrived with uncharacteristic nervousness. Damien, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, found himself changing his tie 3 times and second-guessing the gifts he had selected for the twins. Grace had suggested meeting at a local park, neutral territory where the children could be comfortable. As his driver navigated the unfamiliar Portland streets, Damien rehearsed what he would say, how he would act, then reminded himself that this wasn't a business meeting to be scripted and controlled. It was life, messy and unpredictable and real. He spotted them immediately. Grace seated on a bench while Michael and Mary explored a nearby playground. For a moment, he simply watched from a distance, drinking in the sight of his children at play. Michael methodically building a structure in the sandbox, Mary fearlessly scaling the highest climbing frame. Grace noticed him first, raising a hand in greeting. As he approached, the twins looked up with the natural curiosity of children encountering someone new in their familiar space. Michael, Mary, Grace called. Come meet my friend, Mr. Richard. They approached cautiously, studying him with those amber eyes so like his own. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. Mary with his determined chin, Michael with his analytical gaze. Hello, Damien said, kneeling to their level despite his expensive suit. I'm very happy to meet you both. You're the man from the party, Mary declared, recognition dawning. The one who looks like me and Michael. Children's directness could be disarming. Damien glanced at Grace, who gave a small nod of encouragement. Yes, that's right, he confirmed. I'm an old friend of your mother's. Do you live in Portland too? Michael asked, his first contribution to the conversation. No, I live in Boston, but I'm visiting for a few days. That's very far away, Mary observed. Did you come on an airplane? I did, and I brought something for each of you, if that's all right with your mother. He looked to Grace, who nodded again. From his briefcase, Damien produced 2 carefully wrapped packages. For Michael, a sophisticated building set that would challenge his architectural instincts. For Mary, a telescope, not a toy but a real one, sized for a child but with genuine scientific capability. Mom says I'm going to be an architect like her, Michael said as he examined his gift with careful hands. You certainly have the talent for it, Damien replied, watching his son's methodical exploration of the building pieces. I want to be an astronaut, Mary announced, already figuring out how to extend the telescope. Or maybe the president. I haven't decided yet. You have plenty of time to decide, Damien assured her, fighting back unexpected emotion at this glimpse into his daughter's boundless ambition. The afternoon unfolded with a naturalness that surprised all of them. They explored the park, got ice cream from a vendor, and talked about everything and nothing. Damien found himself laughing more than he had in years, particularly at Mary's unfiltered observations and Michael's quiet, deadpan humor. As the day drew to a close, a sudden summer shower sent them running for shelter under a park pavilion. Mary, racing ahead, slipped on the wet grass and fell hard, a sharp cry escaping her as she clutched her arm. Damien reached her first, parental instinct overriding any hesitation. Let me see, sweetheart, he said gently, examining the already swelling wrist with careful hands. I think we need to have a doctor look at this. Grace arrived with Michael, concern etched on her face. Is it broken? Possibly sprained, at least, Damien assessed, already lifting Mary carefully into his arms. My car is closer than yours. We can be at the emergency room in 10 minutes. What followed was a blur of activity. The drive to the hospital, the efficient way Damien navigated the admission process, the quiet reassurance he provided to a frightened Mary as the doctor confirmed a minor fracture that would require a cast. You can pick any color you want, the nurse told Mary as she prepared the casting materials. Blue, Mary decided firmly, like the sky where astronauts go. Throughout it all, Grace watched Damien with growing wonder. This was not the man she had left 5 years ago, the one who would have delegated such a crisis to an assistant while he attended to more important matters. This was someone entirely new, or perhaps someone who had been there all along, buried beneath layers of control and ambition. Hours later, with Mary proudly sporting a blue cast covered in signatures from everyone who had treated her, they stood in the parking lot of Grace's modest Portland home. Thank you, she said quietly as the twins waited in her car, exhausted from the day's excitement. You were remarkable with her. It felt natural, Damien admitted, surprised by the truth of it. Like I'd been doing it all my life. You should have been, Grace said, regret coloring her words. I'm sorry for that, Damien. Whatever my reasons, they deserved to know you. And you deserved to know them. We can't change the past, he replied, echoing words she had once said to him. We can only move forward, moment by imperfect moment. Grace smiled at hearing her own philosophy return to her. When do you go back to Boston? My return flight is tomorrow evening. Come for breakfast, she offered impulsively. Before you go, the twins will want to show you their rooms, their toys, everything. I'd like that very much. As Damien watched Grace drive away with their children, something shifted within him. A recognition that the control he had clung to so desperately had been an illusion all along. The most precious things in life couldn't be scheduled, managed, or arranged to specification. They could only be experienced, embraced, cherished in all their messy, unpredictable glory. The months that followed brought changes no strategic plan could have anticipated. Weekly video calls with the twins became part of Damien's non-negotiable schedule. Monthly visits to Portland, or occasionally, carefully planned visits by Grace and the twins to Boston, created a rhythm of family life he had never imagined possible. Meridian continued to thrive, not despite Damien's shifted priorities, but because of them. His executive team, empowered by his new approach to leadership, brought fresh perspectives that drove innovation. His own creativity, long suppressed by relentless focus on control, flourished in the space created by balance. And Grace, the woman he had never stopped loving, gradually lowered the walls she had built to protect herself and their children. Their co-parenting relationship evolved into friendship, and then, cautiously, into something more. 1 year after their chance encounter at the gala, Damien found himself once again in formal wear, this time in the garden of Grace's Portland home. Michael stood beside him in a matching suit, solemn in his role as best man. Mary scattered rose petals with characteristic enthusiasm, her blue cast long gone, but the experience a favorite story she told anyone who would listen. As Grace appeared in a simple ivory dress, her eyes finding his with a certainty that had been missing 5 years before, Damien Richard, billionaire CEO, master strategist, and now, most importantly, father and soon-to-be husband, finally understood the lesson that had taken him so long to learn. True success wasn't measured in acquisitions or achievements. It wasn't found in perfect control or flawless execution. It lived in the messy, beautiful moments of connection, in the courage to be vulnerable, in the wisdom to know what truly mattered, and the strength to prioritize it above all else. If the story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your perspective on what matters most in life? Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as our biggest challenges, and the things we think we want aren't always what we truly need. Until next time, remember that it's never too late for a second chance at love, or at becoming the person you were always meant to be.